Constructors in C++. A constructor is a special function or method that is used to initialize an object automatically when it's created. If you do not create a constructor in your class, the compiler will create one for you automatically. A constructor is called as soon as the object is created. A constructor is called before any function is called. So if you are in your main and you're trying to call any function, the constructor will called first, then your member functions will be called after. Constructors has the same name as the class. A constructor does not have a return type. The constructor should be the name of your class, open and closing brackets, and open and closing braces if necessary. I'm going to create a class to demonstrate a default constructor. Let's include our header files. I'm going to create a class called student. And inside of my student class, I want two private variables. So one's going to be age, and I also want another int for student number. I also want some public get and set methods. So I'm going to use the keyword public, and I'm going to write my get and set functions. I want to set my age, so there will be no return type. So this function will be void. I'm going to call my function setAge, and inside of my setAge function I want an integer called age, and I'm going to set my age in my class that is private to the age that is passed through the parameter. I would also create a set function for student number as well, and I also want an integer in the parameter, and I'm going to call this variable student number, and I also want to set my private student number to the student number that is passed through the parameter. And I'm going to create two get function to return the value of age and student number. So the return type will be an int, and I'm going to call this function get age. This function is to return my member variable age, and I also want another int function that will return the student number. So after my set and get methods, I want to add a default constructor. Now if you do not add a default constructor to your class, the compiler will do it automatically. So the constructor name should be the same name as your class. So my class is called student, and the constructor name will also be student. Open and close braces. Now let's create a main, and inside my main I want to create a student object. So I'm going to use the student data type, and I'm going to call my object stuObj, and I want to set my age and my student number. So I would use the object that I just created, and the age will be 23, and I also want to set the student number, and the student number will be 1234. So let us write some code to print the value. I just write a cout statement, and let us also print the student number. Let us build and run the program. Everything was successful, and here we have the value of 23 and 1234 as the student number. Now the default constructor, even if we remove it, it will still print the same values because the compiler would automatically create a default constructor for you. Now if we run the program, we get the same values as before. Now with a default constructor, when you create an object, the constructor will call first, and then it will call the other methods in your class. So to demonstrate this, let us put a statement in the constructor. So std, and we're going to put a simple note saying this is coming from the default constructor. We did not call the student constructor. We cannot do something like this. student. And you see here we have an error. You cannot do that. Type name is not allowed. You cannot call a constructor. when we create this object, student will be called automatically. Let us build and run the program. In our compiler, you would see that this is coming from the default constructor. So this is going to print first, and then the set function will take in control, and then we would print the age and the student number with the get method. A parameterized constructor is a constructor that contains arguments. So to create a parameterized constructor, you still use the same name as a class. And inside of the parameter of the student constructor, we can have an int age, and we can also have an int for student number. And inside of the constructor, we can use the data member age and student number and initialize it to the age and the student number that is passed through the parameter. This is the main reason of a parameterized constructor. You use a parameterized constructor to initialize private data members in your class. So we can say this age is equals to the age that is passed through the constructor, and we can also initialize the student number to the student number that is passed through the parameter of the constructor. Because we have created a parameterized constructor to initialize our private data members, we can remove the set functions for student age and student number. Let's comment these two functions. If we run the code, we should get the same results as when we have our set age and set student number. And by doing this, we need to make some changes in our main function because we don't have the set age and the set student number anymore. So let us comment these two lines of codes as well. This time we're going to initialize our student object to set the age and the student number. So the age will be 23 and the student number this time is going to be 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we can also use the get function. We can leave it that way. So let's build and run. We get the same data that we just initialized to. A copy constructor is used to initialize the members of a newly created object by copying the members of an already existing object to the new object that is created. So to create a copy constructor, you still have to use the same name as your class, student, and inside of the parameter, let us use the const keyword, and we want the name of the class. This is going to be student, and we want to copy what's in one object over to another object. So we have a student object obj1. So this here is called passed by reference, and because we make this const, it cannot be modified. And to initialize the values inside of our constructor, we can do something like this. This age is going to equals to our new object that we just created dot age, and we also want to initialize the student number as well. So this student number is going to equals to obj, which is our object, dot student number. So the newly created object is of student type, and because it's of student type, we have access to the age and the student number. And this method is called copy initialization. So because we created a copy constructor, inside of main, we can do something like this. Student. And let us create another student object. So stu, we're going to call it stu obj2. And what we're going to do for this object, we are going to initialize it to stu obj, which is our object we created at line number 36. So instead of using the stu obj, let us use stu obj2 to get the value. The values now in stu obj2 for age and student number should be the exact same thing for stu obj. So let us build and run, get the same values. Let me create two other statements. So let me copy these two lines of code and I will paste it here. So this one here is the newly created object. So I'm going to put a note here saying the age from stubj to, let me delete this part and let me change this as well. And this is going to be the regular age. So actually, let me put, and let me also change this one so it can be a little bit readable. Okay, so let's build and run. So you see here, we have the same information. Now pay close attention to the results on my screen. If we look at where the age from stubj, what happened is that we do not get the message from the constructor because the constructor was not copied over to the newly created object.